Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the 4th of July 2020, I have the honor of conducting my second interview with the American Senator James C. Rosapepe, former ambassador of the US in Romania between 1998 and 2001. Welcome, Your Excellency. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Cu plăcere.
Senator, exactly 1 year ago, to be more precise, on the 1st of July 2019, you were visiting the University of Medicine, Pharmacy, Science and Technology, George Emil Palade of Târgu Mureș, Romania, on the occasion of being awarded the title of Honorary Doctor, also known as Doctor Honoris Causa. Looking back to that day, what was it like to return to the country where you served as ambassador and to receive recognition for your work and achievements?
Well, obviously, it was a great honor and a joy. The day that I spent at the university last year was a wonderful day. I'd been to Târgu Mureș before, but I hadn't visited the university and understood so much about what the university was doing. And of course, the merger of the university and the growth of it was very impressive. And it was an honor to get the recognition that the university bestowed. And so it's nice to be back with you today, at least virtually.
We are very glad that you accepted our invitation. I believe that feels to have happened in a totally different world, because in the meantime, the entire world has been facing an unprecedented health crisis, the coronavirus pandemic. It started in early winter and we can still not see the end of it. Next, I would like to ask you about the US coronavirus epidemic situation. The US currently reports over 2 million coronavirus cases and over 120,000 deaths. Has Maryland been one of the most affected states? Have the two districts you represent in the state Senate been seriously affected?
Well, Maryland has been seriously affected, not as badly as some other places. But after the crisis in New York City, which I'm sure everyone heard about a month or so ago, where it seemed things were going to overwhelm the hospitals. That was the great fear. It didn't happen, but obviously many people died and many people got very ill. And they were able to tamp it down in New York. In the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, where I live, it started growing fairly quickly. The area that I live in the suburbs of Washington, actually was the most affected area in the Washington area, as well as in the state of Maryland. Not exactly the community that I live in, but part of the area that I represent. I live in College Park, where the University of Maryland is located. And like so many universities, when the decisions were made that people needed to isolate and not be in large groups together, they sent all the students they could home, and folks worked online, as students have around the world over this period. And so that really depopulated literally the town that I live in. Although there were foreign students, for example, who couldn't go home. And so we have quite a few foreign students at the University of Maryland. And so the university arranged for them to have housing that was safe, but those folks stayed. Since then, the efforts that have been made, like the efforts in Romania, to discourage people from being out and about too much, have brought down the rate of hospitalization. The rate of infections are still going up, but they're not going up as dramatically as they were. And we're hoping that it'll level off. Now, people talk in the United States in general, and certainly in Maryland, about a second wave, on the theory that what's happened so far is one wave and now it's tamping down some. And the question is, will it go back up again? We don't know. Elsewhere in the United States, generally in the southern part of the United States and the western part of the United States, which were not hit as hard early on, those are the areas now where the rate of infection is going up pretty dramatically in some states. I don't think our situation is that different than many places in the world. It's obviously worse than some places and better than some places. And it's part of it, I think, is luck. Part of it is the effectiveness of the public health measures that the government takes, that employers take, that universities take, that citizens take among themselves. So we're all living through this together. We'll get through it.
Yes, hopefully. What has been your role as a political leader and legislator throughout this period? Did you continue to work from home?
Yes, absolutely. Where I'm talking to you from right now, from my living room. And so, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that many people have found, and mostly white collar people who can work from home, like the two of us, is that it's different. And in some ways, it's not as good. You like to be out and about, and you like to be with other people. On the other hand, we are able to communicate through these video chats, these video conversations, video conferences. I mean, I do big meetings, as I'm sure other people doing all over Romania, on Zoom or other platforms. And so people have learned a new set of skills. I mean, partly the technical skills to be sure you can actually get the Zoom to work, but also social skills. I was on a call last week with actually the congressman from my area, Steny Hoyer, who's the majority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives. And he was making the point, which I think is correct. He said, now that we have done so much of this video conferencing, telephone calls seem kind of cold, because telephone calls, you can't see the person you're talking to. And now we're used to, even when we're not with them, being able to see people, see their body language and so forth. And I think that's right. And so I think that will have a material effect going forward on how we operate. Now that's for those of us who can work from home. But then you have all the workers who can't work from home. Construction workers can't work from home. Bus drivers can't work from home. Retail sales clerks in grocery stores can't work from home. And obviously that's why they've been in the most danger. And that's why people in those sorts of jobs have gotten the virus at a higher rate than folks who are able to work at home the way folks like us are.
This is one major change that you noticed in connection with the American society. Can you also identify other changes, other ways in which the American nation as a whole has been affected by the pandemic? And how much, in your opinion, have the lives of the American people changed definitively or temporarily?
Just as people, white collar folks who can work from home are doing so and learning these new techniques, obviously, and this is particularly relevant for a university community, the way students are learning and the way teachers are teaching are dramatically different, both at the university level and at the lower levels. I'm on the board of a school from grade 6 through 12 in College Park. And as luck would have it, when the school was designed about 7 years ago, it was designed to have an entirely online curriculum and to have about a third of its instruction done on the internet, because that's the way the world was moving anyway. And we felt that it was an opportunity for kids to get more exposure. So for example, there are only 650 students in the school. But we offer 7 foreign languages, because if you can offer classes online, they can take classes with children any place in the world. They don't all have to be in the same room. So you don't need 25 students to offer Japanese. You can have 2 students in our little school take Japanese, and other students will take it someplace else. So we already designed it into the school. So when the coronavirus came, we were one of the few schools. It's called College Park Academy. It's here in College Park. It was founded by the University of Maryland and the city of College Park. We were one of the few schools in the nation, maybe in the world, at the high school and middle school level that was able to seamlessly go online, because the students were used to it, the teachers were used to it, whereas lots of other schools, that's been very disruptive. Teachers who've never taught online, on Friday they were teaching in a classroom, and on Monday, they were teaching online. Very difficult transition. I think that has a big short-term effect. And I think a lot of us are concerned that a lot of children have lost opportunities to learn during this period. On the other hand, I think it's going to have a positive long-term effect, because the skill set of the teachers and the students are going up. Similar example is in what we call telemedicine, is people being treated, again, you can't do everything in medicine, obviously, virtually, but you can do a lot. And I felt that we were behind where we should have been in terms of making it more convenient for people to be able to get consultations about their health and advice about their health. And, you know, yes, you can't take somebody's blood over Zoom, but you can look at the color of their skin. You can look in their eyes, and there are a whole variety of things you can do. Anyway, so we've expanded that dramatically. I think that's here to stay. So I think those are some of the changes that I've seen in the short run. I think some of the impacts in the longer run. I think basically, there's an expression in English, I don't know if it translates well into Romanian, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes.
I think that's essentially what the virus is. It can kill you. It's very dangerous. That's why we need to be very serious about these public health measures. On the other hand, as a society, it's not going to kill our society. And I think in some ways it's going to make us stronger.
Yeah. Indeed, this pandemic pushed the entire world, in fact, to take advantage of the technology that is widely available, and we somehow remained stuck in some traditional way of doing things. And now, you know, we can take advantage and use technology in public administration, in schooling, in connection with our professions of all kinds. And yeah, so we can see the bright side, right? It's important to see the bright side of this pandemic. Senator, what has your personal response to the pandemic been? Have your plans changed? Do you have new routines? Did you have to cancel travel project
Sure.
as a consequence?
Yes, yes, and yes. First of all, our legislative session, which normally goes for 90 days every year, we had to end it 3 weeks early, which is the first time the Maryland legislature has ended early since the American Civil War in the middle of the 19th century. We did it because when the legislature meets, not just legislators, but the public come. So there's tremendous interaction of people, which without the pandemic is a wonderful thing. And is a big strength of democracy is people get to interact with each other. They get to interact with their elected officials. But obviously very dangerous in the context of the virus. So we quit. We ended our session 3 weeks early. Now we finished our major work. We passed our budget. We passed major legislation. But some legislation we couldn't deal with with that shortened period of time. So some important issues got put off till next year because we meet every year for 90 days. So that's one. Secondly, on travel plans, I actually had already booked a trip to Europe and to Romania, to visit Romania in early May, and obviously had to cancel that. Otherwise, it's pretty much, again, as I say, like most white-collar folks who can work from home, is my wife and I have stayed home, although my wife, who, as you know, is a journalist, she's a radio broadcaster in Baltimore. And so she actually is one of the few people who I know who worked from home most of the time, but a couple of days a week has had to go to her office in Baltimore to work, and her other folks with the station have. I kidded her that one of the favorite expressions in the United States for people who needed to go outside their house during the period are called essential workers. And that's what we talked about. It's police, it's bus drivers, it's retail clerks, etc. And so she told me that journalists are essential workers too. And so and it's true. And so she has gone to her office some, but I've stayed home most of the time. I mean, I get out. We never had a lockdown in the sense of you couldn't leave your house or you couldn't leave your community, and people who needed to did. But what was impressive, I think, and I think what has worked, is the overwhelming number of people in the United States, and I'm sure this is true in Romania and every place else, but I've just seen it in the United States, pretty quickly understood the problem and pretty quickly understood the solution. That as long as we didn't have a vaccine, as long as we didn't have treatment, as long as we didn't, and this was a big problem in the United States, it's gotten much better, have testing available on a large scale. As you know, in some of the countries like Taiwan and other places, they did very extensive testing early on, which was important because they could then have people who tested positive and people they were in contact with isolate for 2 weeks. But because we didn't know who had the virus and who didn't have the virus, basically the policy was everybody should isolate. And that's what shut down the economy. And so obviously it's been very, very damaging from an economic side. But from my point of view, I go out of the house every day. I have gone out of the house every day. I take walks. I drive to the grocery store. So it's basically, and I also have gone around my district some because there have been occasions when there was some reason I needed to do it, or in some cases, particularly early on, I just wanted to see what was going on. So I wanted to go to, I know in my own little community what's going on, I can see it, but there are parts of my district that are, 15 miles away. And so I would go and visit to try to see what stores were closed, what was going on. So, as I say, it's not the worst thing in the world to spend all day at home with my wife. So it's a tremendous burden.
Yes. Okay. So, despite not being in total lockdown, the Americans in general, and you and your wife and everybody were still concerned and paid very close attention to this pandemic situation, right? And try to do your best under the circumstances. And that's why it's very surprising what happened starting with the 25th of May. Until that day, it was hard to imagine that the US that in the US, an issue would demand more immediate attention than the coronavirus pandemic. And then came the death at the hands of a policeman, or rather at the knee of a policeman, of George Floyd, a 46-year-old unarmed black man from Minneapolis. And a torrent of grief and anger erupted into the streets, which determined many Americans, and not only, to grapple with the deepest of questions. And now, what I would like to ask you, you are a Democrat, and could you offer us a balanced view of the societal and systemic causes which led these law enforcers to have this harsh treatment and violence towards African American people, and to attitudes of racial bias?
Sure. Obviously, I don't have all the answers, but I understand, having grown up in the United States, the racial issues that America has had, certainly in my lifetime and certainly before my lifetime. And I'm sure everyone watching this knows the history of the United States in terms of race relations. And slavery was built into the United States as it was created. The U.S. Constitution didn't recognize African American slaves as people. It counted them, 3/5 of them, for the purposes of apportioning votes among the states. Crazy stuff today. It's like you can't understand, what were they thinking? And so then you had, obviously, the Civil War, which ended slavery in a legal sense, but the attitudes remained. It's obviously not a perfect analogy, but when I try to explain to Americans about the transition from communism in Romania, they say, well, why didn't this change? Why did this change? Why didn't that change? I say, well, the political system changed, but it was the same people in the same place. You had the same Danube River. You had the same snowfall in the mountains. It's the same place. And literally between December of 1989 and January of 1990, people were 1 month older. And so relationships, attitudes, good and bad, did not change dramatically because the political system changed. And that's essentially what happened with the end of slavery in the United States at the end of the Civil War. A system had been created in which African Americans were held down. And that continued in different ways. And I think part of what you've seen graphically in the conflicts with the police in the United States is that a lot of African Americans correctly feel as though the way police forces and people in police, not everybody obviously, but situations, I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine an African-American state senator with me, we were talking about this situation, and she made the point that obviously what happened to George Floyd was murder, was tragic, was unacceptable, and everybody sees that. She made the point that one of the reasons why it has had such resonance with so many African Americans is these African Americans have so many more interactions with the police than other people do. And partly it's because many of them are lower income, don't have jobs, get into trouble of various kinds. Part of it is because of this history of bad race relations and African Americans being afraid of non-African Americans and other folks being afraid of African Americans, the kind of ethnic conflict that frankly you see other places in the world, but it's very intense in the United States because of the history of slavery. And therefore, if you come in contact with the police more, bad things are more likely to happen to you with the police. And so I think all of that, because, and this does go to technology, because of technology and the fact that what happened to Mr. Floyd was seen by people around the world. They didn't hear about it. I mean, this is where a picture is worth 1,000 words, is the sorts of things that many African Americans knew were true and other people weren't sure were true. They could see it with their own eyes. And I think that's clearly why it had such a big impact. I think the other reason it had a broad impact, and you related to changing attention from the COVID virus, is I think that from strictly a public opinion point of view, I think people were tired of talking about the virus. I think in an ironic way, people, I think correctly, understood there were other important things in the world, like the way African Americans too often are treated, and having the opportunity to pay attention to that, think about that, listen, talk, and you see that in terms of the demonstrations, which have been ongoing, and they're still ongoing to some extent. There's been some violence for sure, and that's obviously unacceptable. But the overwhelming number of protests have been very peaceful, and I mean, I participated in one in my district 2 Sundays ago, I guess. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people organized by young people. And there were African Americans and Latinos and European Americans. I don't know whether there were any Romanian Americans in the group or not, but there were lots of different kinds of people. And it was serious and it was focused, but it was purposeful and positive. And that's what most of the demonstrations have been. People are saying, look, this is a problem that has deep roots. This is a problem that is not going to go away tomorrow, but it's a problem that we can work on and make progress on. And in the legislature, we actually have a group that's working on some very specific proposals that we're going to take up when we come back into session to increase accountability and transparency, because that's really the issue with the police departments.
Yes, indeed. So you already plan to change a number of laws, but do you think that other changes should also happen in connection or at the level of the mentality of the people living in the state? So not only they shouldn't only be forced by law to have certain attitudes. I guess a shift is in order right now, right?
I think that's true, and I think that it has been going on and needs to go on more. And an example is the University of Maryland in College Park, where I live, until the early 1950s, was basically only whites could go to it. And they're what we call historically black colleges in the United States, including one in my county, Bowie State University, that was set up so African Americans could go to college because they couldn't go to college with whites. Well, starting in the 1950s, that was changed legally, but it took time for people, African Americans, to feel comfortable coming to the historically white campus of the University of Maryland, or for whites to feel comfortable going to the historically black college. And that's a mentality issue that you're talking about. And I think it is changing. I think it's changing more slowly, much more slowly than everybody would like. It's changing for some people and not for other people. You know, in some sense, it's the human condition. I mean, we're not perfect. And so people have prejudices, people have misconceptions, people have attitudes. And so that plays out. And obviously, you know, there are ethnic conflicts in your part of the world as well. And so it's not good, but it's part of the human condition. And so we need to work through it sort of every day. The US and a few other places in the world have the special issue of the history of slavery and African Americans, because that's quite different than other kinds of ethnic conflicts that weren't based in a brutal system like slavery.
Yeah. We are broadcasting this interview on the 4th of July, when the US celebrates the Independence Day. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress declared that the 13 American colonies were no longer subordinated to the monarch of Britain, King George III, and were, as of that day, united, free, and independent states. Thus, July the 4th is a celebration of justice, liberty, prosperity, and equal opportunity. That's the National Day in America, in the US this year, have some sort of bitter undertones, or can you still see opportunities where others see obstacles, and hold the hope that authentic values such as liberty, democracy will emerge even stronger?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think that is part of the American character is optimism. And the sense of rebirth and the sense of opportunity. I don't think American attitudes are dramatically different than they were a year ago on the 4th of July towards what this country's about. I do think, though, celebrating the 4th of July is different, which is celebrating the 4th of July is a big deal in the United States. And it's in the summertime, the weather is generally good. And so everything from picnics to parades, which are incredibly ubiquitous in the United States on the 4th of July, are largely not happening this year. I think people will have picnics outside because it's actually safer to be outside with groups than it is to be inside. So I think picnics will probably be pretty strong today. But parades and fireworks, those are the two things that are, everybody knows in the United States about the 4th of July. In my area, there are two cities, College Park and Laurel, which have beautiful fireworks displays on the 4th of July, not doing them today. In Laurel, they have an all day, they have a parade, and then they have a music festival, and then they have fireworks, not doing it today. They are doing some online activities, but the traditional 4th of July, which people really look forward to, is not happening today. There may be some places in the United States, but not in our area.
Yes, I understand. Coming back to your connection to Romania, in 1998, you were appointed ambassador to Romania. You came to our country without having visited it prior. You held office and were a very active ambassador here for 3 years until 2001. You had this diplomatic mission that is documented in the book Dracula is Dead, that we are so happy to have been published and to have changed some mentality about Romania. And then you returned to the US and still continued to be involved in various projects meant to strengthen the cooperation between Romania and the United States of America, among which was the co-founding of the organization called Alianza. You told us about this organization last time. What actions has Alianza carried out in the past year to continue to upgrade the image of Romania in the US and to facilitate opportunities that benefit both the citizens of Romania and the citizens of the US?
Well, one very specific thing that we are working on now and have been since late last year is encouraging Americans of Romanian heritage to mark on their U.S. Census form their Romanian heritage. There's a 10-year census in the United States, as there is in Romania and other countries. And there's a question, it's question 9 on the census questionnaire that asks you, what is your country of origin? And some people fill that in, some people don't fill that in. And Alianza felt it would be good, important, to maximize the number of people who have Romanian heritage, even if it's, you know, one grandmother, one grandfather. Maybe, you know, their other parent or other grandparent comes from other countries, that's fine. But if you have some Romanian heritage, we put together a social media campaign, which we've gotten a great response to encourage folks to fill that in on the census form, because that will show people at a government level in the United States, that will show people in business, that will show people in communities as well as nationally, that there are a lot of Americans of Romanian heritage and where they are. And so that's one program that we've been working on, we're still working on. Because of the virus, the deadline for finishing the census got extended until August. So it's an ongoing campaign. That's one. Secondly, because of the pandemic, we decided, as many people have done, to launch a series of webinars for folks to participate in. And so we've done some, and there's some more coming up where we're going to be, particularly because it's not travel. Remember, the travel to the United States and Romania, it hadn't been for months. People are paying attention to what's happening in Romania. And like this interview, you're asking what's going on in the United States, which is really appreciated. But we want to have an opportunity for people sort of broadly to understand exactly the questions you're asking. What's the same? What's the difference from a public health point of view, from an economic point of view, looking ahead for recovery. So we're doing a series of webinars. The other thing that we're preparing for, because we have a big election in the United States, I think everybody knows, we're hopeful that after this election, regardless of who wins, that there'll be a new effort to try to reform our visa and immigration laws. And Allianz is committed to working with Bulgarian Americans and others who don't have visa waiver, as most European Union countries do. And so we're hoping that there'll be an opportunity in the Congress next year. And so we're preparing for that. So those are some of the things we're working on.
Okay, so quite a lot of activity considering the whole context, both in the States and in all over the world. In fact, I wanted to say Romania, but all over the world.
Absolutely.
So you are hopeful that if the administration changes, the visa problem will find some solution, and this is great news for us. Because the interview is coming to an end, I'd like to invite you to address the academic community of Târgu Mureș you belong to as of last year.
Well, it's such an honor to be part of the academic community in Târgu Mureș, and I look forward to coming back to visit when that is possible. And I just wish everyone good luck, because particularly in academia, there are particular challenges in dealing with the pandemic, partly related to instruction, partly related to research. And so I wish everyone good luck and good health and good fortune.
I also want to say that we are very grateful to have you here, that you were very generous with us to give us this interview. And it was great that you shared so much optimism, and everything you said was affirming and inspiring despite this negative period in which we all live. And we are looking forward to having you here again in Târgu Mureș in particular.
As am I.
Thank you once again. This is the end of the show. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon.